Hey everyone, I wanted to show you a little bit of our current berry situation in a series of short clips. This is a small native bee resting here in the cool weather. We had a bit of rain yesterday, so there's moisture on the ground and on the leaves. And those are our red currant bushes. They are, I think, 3 or 4 years old. Started from a single cutting. They have a good fruit set, and it just starting to ripen. Maybe in a week or 10 days time we'll have more to harvest. And this here is a bit oddly leaning because the kids were playing ball here the other day, and they kicked the ball really hard and kind of smashed into the bush, so I had to stake it up and tie it to keep it upright. Even if those branches don't survive, I hope they will at least ripen the berries, but we have new growth coming up, so it's not such a problem for currants. Also here you can see where I've made my spring cuts to stimulate the side growth, and you can see the new shoots that emerged this spring to make a denser crown. But also you can rely on new root suckers like this one, so in a few years time, maybe 2 years time, when this bush is really settled, because it was moved here recently, it will become denser and more spread. This is the undamaged one, and you can see it's in a nice shape. And those are 1 year older black currants. They have thicker stems and new growth and almost no fruit set on them, because when they were flowering we had a series of bad days and low temperatures. I think there was not enough pollination, but still there is some. I also started a few dozen cuttings from those, because I always want to have some cuttings to give away as gifts to friends in the village. And I'll show you now the other berries we still have going on. We still have a few of the honeyberries left. The kids, they did their best to pick most of them, but to our delight, they don't ripen all at the same time. And even those varieties which started earlier, you can see that they still have green ones, which will be on maybe in a week or more. So this is great to have a longer harvest time. Here we have beginning to ripen gooseberry. It's a Hinumaki Rouge variety, so it has a reddish tinge to it when it's ripe. It's thorny, but if you're careful, it's not much of a problem. This little bush here, it was just a single little stem, you can see down here, 2 years ago, but it really grew nicely, and I had to tie it a bit to a stake because it was spreading too much. Also, I propagated a couple, maybe 6 or 7 plants out of it to be able to give that away. I have the hose here for another operation I'll talk to you about. Those are the Wojtek variety honeyberries. You can see how large they get thanks to the 2 rain and hail events we had recently. And another feature of the Wojtek is, which I really like, is that Even when they're fully ripe, you can see they're slightly squishy. They don't drop off easily from the branch, so you have to pull them a bit stronger, which is great because they don't fall to the ground as easily as other varieties. We also have wild strawberries going on in this corner, and you can see the kids pick those clean. A few unripe here as well, and some self-propagating in the hollow spaces of the concrete blocks we use for retaining wall. Some regular strawberries here as well. Most of them are from my late grandparents' garden. They don't really do well in those planters in summer because it's very hot and very dry, and you have to water them daily, which is not usually possible. We also have a separate raised bed for new varieties of strawberries. We got 4 of them last autumn and planted them here. Most of them didn't fruit much as I expected, but now that the fruiting is almost done, those are the last few berries, they have started to send out the runners, and I'm hoping they will get dense in a couple of years time, and those little stakes are markers for the end of each variety, and we'll take care to direct the runners of each variety into its own section so they don't get mixed up, at least at the beginning. We want to see which perform better in our context and keep those that we like the best. As the strawberry starts that we got last year were rather small, they were tiny and not very well developed roots because they were cheap. Most of them, maybe like 50%, didn't take, so we saw that in early spring and decided to not let this bed sit empty whole summer, so we interplanted some green onions in it, which we are pulling out regularly for salads and cooking, and so the bed gets emptier and emptier, less and less onion with time. Like here there's a row of onion we have put, and this will allow space for the strawberries to run suckers just when they need that in with the beginning of summer. And this is the area where I propagate fruit bushes. We have some smaller honeyberries here, and an interesting piece of the system is that I try to use wild strawberries as a ground cover along with white clover, and it's a nice little bonus to have the fruit which you can pick along with the honeyberries. So edible ground covers are my favorite. You can see that those plants which are mostly 2 years old, direct rooted or layering, still small, but even them have some fruit set. And those smaller leaves, the newest Canadian varieties, which actually are not propagated, but they arrived in that size, so I'm waiting for them to establish another year and then I'll start propagating them. We also have a few, maybe 4 blueberry plants, high bush blueberry, which were planted in acidic peat moss. Recently they do not grow much, and one of the problems I have with them is that they kind of start producing new growth later in season, and the wood is not able to ripen properly, so it seems to die off in winter due to frost damage. But they're still very young, and kind of in a trial mode. Still nice to have another variety of berry for the kids. And this is the raspberry patch. Sun just came out, and you can see we have quite some fruit set here. Bumblebees and honeybees are busy pollinating. It's a mix of many varieties, several of which I don't really know the name for. But it's a collection we're trying to establish and see which one performs best, and then propagate to a larger patch. Most of those have 2 harvests per year, and here you can see the older patch, which is mostly grass now, but it's still producing, and the idea is for this autumn to dig it all up and just move the raspberries to a new location. We can never have too many of those. I'm thinking about moving a few hundred of those plants up to our community garden where there is more space, and I think it will be more suited for perennial crops, but we'll see how this goes. One other thing I wanted to talk about is those 2 blackcurrant bushes. They were moved here last autumn, and they had very hard time settling in. You can see that they struggled by the fact they have so few leaves and almost no fruit set, and they're well established 5-year-old bushes, or at least they were in their previous location. And the mistake I did here when I moved them was I didn't prune them enough. I removed just a few branches here and there, but when I was digging them out from their previous location, it was impossible to get all the roots dug out, because at that stage they have very large root system, which also spreads horizontally, so I had to like dig 10 square meters of soil to even attempt to get out most of the roots. So I just cut the roots at about 50 centimeters at each side of the plant, and of course I lost most of the deep roots. At the new location I should have shortened most of the branches, or even removed some of the older ones to promote new growth. And you can see that this is the only new shoot we have, and they produced maybe 6, 7, 8 new shoots in their previous location, and also they haven't grown much at the tips. But I will remedy that next spring. I'll just do a massive trim on them, root many cuttings. You can see we have a branch here that dried out completely as well, so they will be shortened in size, but the cuttings will make many new blackcurrant bushes. And that was just a little reminder that they do benefit from a nice trim when you are moving them to a new location. And finally, although it's not really a berry bush, I wanted to show you one of the mulberries we have. They are all on the fence line, but it's mainly us who pick them. Those are starting to ripen, and in 10 days will be swamped in mulberries. It's a black variety, but we also have a white one, and the one that is white with pink spots on it. They are very delicious and sweet, and it's a large tree. You can see a small quince tree here with nice fruit set, which also has mulberries on it, probably shaken down down by the birds. The ground here gets completely covered in mulberry jam in late June, because the tree is very high and produces lots of fruit, and the birds are fighting for the fruit up there in the branches while we are picking down below. So no matter how much we pick, there's always enough for the wildlife as well. I'll be making a separate clip about the mulberries when they start properly ripening. But I think this is enough of the berries for now, and I'll see you in the next one.